Hi everyone, welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your hosts Kitu Kathari and Deepam Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Today we have special guest Chhavi Verg. Chhavi, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Chhavi. I am born in India, raised in Jersey from Edison. I am a model, I am an actress, I'm a content creator, I'm a speaker. Basically, whatever they let me do, I do.
Great, great. Thanks for that introduction, Chavi. Great to have you. So before we kind of talk about your journey as a content creator, as a model, actress, so on, why don't we go back a few years? Your early childhood. Talk about some motivations, some inspirations that basically stuck with you and kind of inspired you in a way to do what you're doing today. Anything that jumps out?
I think something that I have just always been very inspired by is my parents' courage. So my parents, immigrated from India with me when I was 4. And when I think about it, it's just like looking back now, they were a couple of years older than me when they did that. And how scary that must have been. But they did that in order to pursue a better life, more opportunities in this country. And it's not something I take for granted at all. So, a little background about where I come from. I don't know if you guys can also relate to this, but my grandma and on both sides, both my grandmothers, they were married at a very young age, and education was not really prioritized at the time for women. It was sort of like if you don't have that much money, if your family doesn't have that much money, the priority was given to men, right? Like, we'll educate the boys and not the girls because the
Mhm.
girls are primarily going to be homemakers. So that's the background that I come from. My grandmothers did not get like my dad's mom especially. She got married very young, like when she was maybe like early teens, maybe 11, 12 years old. So, knowing that just a couple generations ago, that's what like the future of women was, I felt very, very grateful and very privileged that I was given all these opportunities. So to this day, I feel very inspired by that wow, I have so many opportunities. It's just something that keeps me going, basically.
That is amazing. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can definitely relate to that because my grandma was also married off at very young age.
Yeah.
I think it's funny story since you mentioned that. So my maternal grandmother, she married my grandfather at an age when she was actually in height. She was younger than him, and then as they grew older, it turned out that she actually was much taller. She gained a lot of height, and my maternal grandfather was not as high in the height. So, and I have inherited that as well. I'm not too too tall myself. But the point is that you are so right that the priorities were given to the male and the guys, and there was very little priorities given to the female, and she wasn't educated at all. So I 100% agree with that. So since you moved to the US, how was your transition in the different culture? I know you basically moved at a very young age, 4 years old, but what is the transition process for you?
I mean, even though I was very young, there are still some things that I remember from that time. I remember predominantly my early experience, like at school. So even though I grew up in Edison, my mom would pack me Indian food for lunch. And I remember one instance so clearly when I was in kindergarten. I had like a full on roti, sabji, dal, that kind of lunch that I brought to school. And the girls that were sitting at my table, none of them were Indian, but they were very like confused by my meal, and they started questioning, almost making fun of what I was eating, saying like, "What are you eating? What's that smell? Why does it look like that?" And I felt very embarrassed. I was just very like, "Oh my gosh, this is different from them." So when I went home that day, I told my mom, "Hey mom, I don't think I'm gonna bring anything to school anymore. This is just, the girls are making fun of it. They're questioning it. I don't want to do this." And my mom just dealt with that situation so beautifully. She said, "Tomorrow I'm gonna pack you something for lunch, and I want you to share it with the girls at your table." And she packed me like pakode or samosa or something like like some sort of snack like that. And when I took it to school, the girls were again questioning, what is that? What is it? Like, what are you eating? So I just shared some of that lunch with them, saying my mom packed a little extra. If you guys want to try it, it's really good. And from that day onwards, these girls just wanted a little bit of my lunch every day because of how much they liked this samosa. And I think for me, at a very young age, it just taught me the importance of really owning who you are, owning your culture and where you come from. So that moment, I mentioned that moment because at a point where I could have definitely, leaned into that embarrassment and I could have completely rejected my identity as an Indian American, because my mom dealt with it the way that she did and allowed me to like experience that, it helped me really embrace that and kind of hold on to my roots even more, thinking that this is not something that I should be ashamed of. This is kind of like my superpower. This is something I can share with other people and
Right.
spread awareness about.
That's actually a really interesting story because I feel like everything has really changed. Even in New Jersey, everything changed after the early 2000s. But
Yeah.
for people that grew up here before then, like I had a very similar experience, right? When I went to, growing up in a majority white town, like when I ate like lunch at school, I tried to avoid Indian food for the exact reason that you said, that people were questioning about it. They're asking, is like, why does it smell like that? What is that? And I just didn't want to answer all those questions. So
Yeah.
actually, for the majority of my middle school and my high school career, I actually ate mainly like white food, so like bagels and like sandwiches and like all different types of sandwiches and like salads and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's,
So
it's
try
really
to minimize it.
it's hard because also I think like the internet has kind of it's led to more awareness about different cultures and accepting where you're from. But like back in our time, the internet was just like it was very new, right? We didn't have social media, we didn't have any of this, and kids didn't know about that from their houses. So it was a very tough field to navigate. And I really feel for you in that sense that that must have been so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because my town was also predominantly white, so it's gotten much better now in terms of the racial diversity. But growing up for me, it was like not an exaggeration, probably 90% white, 10% other.
Wow.
So very very heavy Caucasian.
But I can attest to one fact that I don't know what happened after the school life, Ketan, but I feel that you've really embraced the Indian in yourself. So I can just tell that
No,
you
no,
adapted to that dual
I
identity, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely always had a connection with my brown side though. It,
Right,
it never
right,
changed. The difference was the segregation of it. So in school it'd be more like, predominantly like I would behave white. But then
right.
I went to Sunday school. I always had a lot of brown friends. So I always had a connection to brown culture and like my brown side of my life. It was just different because for a very long time there was like a paradox, or not a paradox, but there was like a juxtaposition of
Like
like,
a double identity almost.
exactly. There we go. That's well said. Thank you for that.
It was like Hannah Montana in a way. I don't know if you guys watch Hannah Montana. Probably.
Well, I've seen a couple episodes growing up, but I haven't seen much of it.
Her double life, basically, of like being a pop star at like, at her concerts and then being her normal school regular self at home. I just thought of Hannah Montana with that double life situation.
I'm gonna say that was one of your favorite shows growing up then.
But I was a very big Disney fan growing
Yeah, there we go. Connect the dots there, right?
up.
So you mentioned a lot about having that confidence in your identity, right? And I know that you pivoted and started doing modeling later on, right? Would you say there was a connection? So your early experiences there connected to your confidence when it came to the modeling career?
I mean, I would definitely say so. It's funny, like when you look back, you see how all the dots connect in your life that you don't always see in the moment. So I've always loved dancing. When I came here to the U.S., my mom started, I was 4, right? So my mom would notice, like, I would be dancing to all these Bollywood songs and everything, and I really enjoyed that. So she put me in Bharatanatyam, she put me in Bollywood, all these different dance classes. And I actually got my first modeling opportunity through dancing because my choreographer at the time was organizing some fashion show. He was also like an event planner. So he was organizing a fashion show, and I was a girly girl growing up. So I loved anything related to fashion, beauty, modeling, makeup, all that stuff. So he had asked me, hey, do you want to be a model for this show that I'm organizing? I was always very tall for my age as well. So I said, yeah, absolutely. And that is how I landed my first modeling opportunity. And then that first modeling opportunity led to a second modeling opportunity, which led to me eventually considering doing pageants. And then, yeah, it's just, it all stemmed from dance and being in front of people and performing.
Wow.
Okay. Wow. Well, that alone takes a lot of confidence right there, right? Just performing in front of people. And I guess that probably helped because you developed that confidence to perform on stage. Because even modeling, right, when you do like the runway walks and all that, that takes a little bit of grace, it takes a little bit of confidence, overcoming stage fright and all of that. So it seems like, if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's multiple pieces connecting together that allowed you to do really well with the modeling career, right? Because you had the
Yep.
confidence in your own identity, the I guess the skill surrounding grace. So that translates into like runway walking, etc.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely say just being able to like put yourself out there, right? Like that's the beautiful part about dancing, where it is when you perform on stage, whatever dance form you're doing, it takes a certain amount of stage presence, right? You have to have the stage presence. It also makes you feel very comfortable in front of large groups. And there's this like element of like spontaneity because even though you have your dances memorized, you have to be very alert and aware on stage. Like what's going on? What's this person doing? What's that person doing? So like I feel like in general, like dancing really just made me feel very comfortable being in front of people live, which is why if you look at like the things I'm pursuing now, whether that's modeling, I don't do runway as much, but like if you look at like, the pageant, if you look at public speaking, it all comes back to the skills that I was able to hone through dancing at a very early age.
Wow,
I
that
think you
makes
said it really well. It's you connect those dots a lot better when you look backwards rather than forwards, right?
yeah, 100%. So Chavi, tell us more about your pageant journey. So how was obviously you mentioned that you were doing some modeling, and then one thing led to another, and you were in the middle of it. But what was your thought process going into it? How did you prepare, and any kind of key events that jump out that you want to mention as part of the journey? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So just basically when it comes to the pageant, right? I kind of touched on how the modeling led to pageants.
Right,
I think the first time I competed, it was definitely just something like it was kind of like a let me just see what happens sort of thing.
right,
I saw this opportunity in my high school newsletter for Miss New Jersey Teen USA, and like any parents, my parents were a little skeptical. Like Desi parents are typically a little skeptical of those things. Like, is it safe? Like, what are they doing there? Like, can you like, is it fair? Do you have to do underhanded, shady things to win? They were very concerned about all those things, and we just thought that okay, it's in the high school newspaper, so it's probably safe and probably not sketchy. So let's just give it a shot. And my first time competing, I got fourth runner-up. So that was a complete shock. Did not expect that, and I think that's kind of what motivated me to try again the second year. But the second time I competed, I had aged out of the teen division, so now I was in the Miss category. And the first time I did Miss, or my second time competing, I didn't place at all. But I think that's just like, sometimes I'm a very big believer in like spirituality, universe, God, certain like, things that happen that lead you down a certain path. After not even placing that year, the second time I competed, I made a friend at that pageant who was one of my contestants, and she just came up to me after when I was crying, like upset that I didn't even place. She said, I see you being not Miss USA but Miss Universe one day, and I need you to promise me that you're going to come back and compete for New Jersey because you are going to be Miss USA. And her faith in me at the time, I was only like 18 at the time, and she was just so sure. She's just like she is a fellow contestant. She wasn't a judge. She was just like another girl competing, and she was so sweet, so kind, and she just had so much faith in me that I thought, okay, let me give this another shot. And that year, following that moment in time, leading up to my win, I just honed in completely on developing myself in every area, like mentally, physically, emotionally. I would say the biggest change that I made I went into health and fitness thinking that I wanted to obtain a certain physique, but getting into health and fitness really made me fall in love with working out, with resistance training. I then got my personal training certification that year. Like, just, I got into yoga. I just developed in so many ways. So I feel like the pageant really helped me get to know myself at a very deep level.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. And how, things, kind of small things lead to bigger things, in the future. It's a perfect example of that, like your friend
Yeah.
advising you in that moment when you were really down.
Yeah, and I also think it just like goes to show the impact that we can have on others' lives just through things like our words and like faith, right? Like,
Right.
I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I'm online, I see a lot of negativity and like meanness towards other
Mhm.
people. And I think people really underestimate the power of their words. Like, if my friend hadn't come up to me after that pageant and said, I think you could be Miss USA one day, you need to compete again, who knows if I would have competed again. But because of her faith and her words and her belief in me, she encouraged me to do that. And that decision changed my whole life.
That is
Wow.
a really beautiful thought, actually. And the reason I say that is because you're right, there is power in words, right? And
Absolutely.
so sometimes you can even get yourself in the right mindset just by using the right language. So a good example, I guess I'll use our personal example here, Deepam, but when we launched this podcast, we said from the first day, it's like we're gonna make this a top 40 podcast. We said
Wow.
that from the first day, right? And so this is before we knew anything about podcasts. So just for context, we only started this podcast about 20 weeks ago. So
Wow.
it's
Four
it's
months.
relatively new, but in a relatively short amount of time, we've got on some pretty decent caliber guests. So
Wow.
and part of that is because just the mindset from day one, the mindset was we're gonna make this big. It doesn't matter how much it'll take. We're gonna keep consistent with it, and we're gonna make it big. So just
That's
I think just that those words of affirmation, or not even words of affirmation, I guess that's part of it, but just that positive mindset from the get go can really lead some benefits down the road.
Yeah, words of affirmation, faith, and then, everything. It's so fascinating to me that everything that we see in the world around us started off as an idea that perhaps one
Mhm.
person had. They expressed it to someone else who decided to get on board. They expressed it to other people who got on board. And, like, that's why we have all the things. Like, that's why we have this medium that we're talking through. It wasn't just like, it was like one person's maybe like thought bubble, and then they got a lot of people on board. They collaborated and they made this happen. So it's unbelievable what words, faith, and like surrounding yourselves with uplifting people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess going off that train of thought, is there any advice you'd give for people that are trying to get into dance or modeling or acting?
Um, that's a great question. I would say definitely as much as other people's positive words can positively impact you, I would say it's very important to have thick skin when it comes to rejection and like criticism that isn't constructive, because as a public figure, as someone who puts themselves out like that, whether it's in dance, whether it's in modeling, whether it's in pageants, um, I have noticed there's some negativity out there, and there's some people that say mean things. There's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of rejection, especially in things like modeling. And to continue to have faith in yourself, even if it seems like other people are not on board, I would say is a very important skill to hone. And I think that's just a life skill in general, right? Like, regardless of what your career path is, everyone has seen rejection. Everyone has had to overcome rejection in some capacity. And to not take that personally and just to be able to say, okay, this didn't work out. Is there something I can learn from this? Is there some way I can grow from this? Or is this just completely invalid because a person doesn't know me? So to kind of be able to you know, set like distinguish between what that criticism is, learn from it if you can,
Mhm.
and then push it aside and keep moving is the best advice that I have for people entering this field.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for that.
All right. So I think, Ketul, I don't know if you have any other questions for Chavi, but maybe you can move on to our next segment of the discussion, which is the rapid fire.
No, I think I have a couple more before we get to
Go
there.
for it. Go for it. Go for
So,
it.
so I guess the one question I have is, what was that? Like, how would you describe that feeling you had when you knew you won?
Oh, it was so surreal. I I don't think I've shared this with many people, but I definitely manifested that. So one of the things when I was going through my fitness journey and I was getting more into yoga and meditation during that lead up to my win, I discovered visualization and the secret, the book, The Secret. And something it talked a lot about was visualizing what you want to happen and then surrendering. And, almost every single day I would meditate for about 10 minutes and I would spend 5 minutes just visualizing how it would feel to win Miss New Jersey USA. I would visualize being on stage, hearing, and Miss New Jersey USA is Chhavi Verg. Like I would play that over and over and like how I would feel, feeling the crown on my head, looking at the stage, like, seeing my family in the corner and like I would internalize that and I would get into that emotion. And it's so funny because when that moment actually happened in real life, I felt like I had already seen that before because I had played that like video clip so many times in my head. So I think that really just got me believing in the power of manifestation and like how powerful again your thoughts really can be.
Yeah, thank you. That is amazing. Yeah, I there's even scientific backing behind that thought as well, actually. It's like, well, at least probabilistically, right? You're gonna have an increased probability of having being a success at whatever you're doing if you visualize it in advance. I know the one that at least I'm aware of is it actually helps a lot with public speaking. If you
Really?
visualize yourself going up on stage and delivering a speech, a keynote, whatever it might be, and doing a tremendous job of it, you're more likely to feel more relaxed and comfortable with doing it, which is going to increase the probability of you doing a great job.
Yeah, I think, our brain, again, I know like this is such a like interesting topic. There's so much that's said about this stuff, but also I think our brain just naturally feels comfortable in paired or like in environments that it can anticipate, right? Like if
Hmm.
you're in an unknown, uncomfortable, unfamiliar environment, you're gonna feel nervous. But if you're going into like a place that you know, or if like an environment that you know, you're just gonna feel more relaxed and maybe the visualization helps in that. I know a lot of sports people use this, right? Like they visualize, like basketball players visualize making the shot, like making the hoop, and they are able to do that. I know this one. I believe it was Tony Robbins. He was talking about how like you can try to like move your arm behind your back, and you just try doing that, see where it ends up, and then close your eyes. Like bring your arms down, close your eyes, and then like imagine going like all the way around your body, and then try to do that, and then almost. I think everyone when we did that exercise, their arm went much farther the second time around when they visualized the result than the first time when they just did it. So I think there's a lot to like uncover in that realm of like how our brain actually, affects our actions and our behaviors in real life when we think about it in advance.
Oh, okay. So I've not heard of the Tony Robbins one, but it seems like I'm gonna have to do some research on that one. That sounds really interesting. How you
Yeah,
can expand even your range of motion through visualization. That's really cool.
yeah, it's very cool, very very fascinating.
Great. Okay. So going off, switching gears a little bit, I know you mentioned you've now started getting to speaking as well, right? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I feel like Miss USA just exposed me to so many different things. It's one of the reasons that I'm pursuing this career with like modeling and everything and acting. And I had an answer that was set in the top three that was related to feminism and women's rights is a topic that I hold very dear to my heart, just given my background and where my family comes from. And initially, in the few months following Miss USA, I was called to a lot of events to speak on women's rights and different things like that. And then, as of recently, I've been getting called to do more events speaking to young adults in their 20s, 30s, dealing with things like the unknown, personal development, self development. I gave a TEDx talk last January in 2021. So, a lot has been opening up in that realm, and it's something that I really am passionate about because I love talking. So to be able to use my voice to communicate with other people and, really just motivate them in a capacity where if they feel like they don't have hope or they feel confused, like I've been there, I can relate to those things. When they feel confusion, if I can give some insight based on my experiences to help them out or give them a little bit of direction, like that's just very meaningful to me. So hopefully in the years to come, I can do more speaking and just continue to impact people through my words.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the interesting thing is that area of business, I guess, it's also ties into everything else you're doing, right? Because it's basically free publicity. You're exposed to an entirely new environment. They may follow you on social media. They may listen or watch, any other content you're putting out there. Maybe watch any movies or any films and stuff that you're working on. So it's interesting because it's technically another business segment, but it ties into every other business segment that you're currently in.
Yeah,
At least,
it's just
at least the ones you've shared.
yeah, everything just kind of connects, and like I said, it just all goes back to dance. It goes back to dance and getting comfortable with being in front of people. And
Mhm.
I feel like speaking, like the present, I was always like that kid in school where if we had a class presentation, everyone would be like, "We don't want to present." Like, I'll present. I'll go up and I'll. So I think it's just it's. There was this book I was reading. I feel like it was. The Divine Deck? No, it was Naval Ravikant's Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you are familiar with that book, but if you're not, definitely highly recommend. And in that book, he talks about how a lot of your interests, like when you were younger, how they transition into career choices you make as you're older, and how you can find certain natural gifts or like talents or skills just based on what you were into when you were little. And just when I was listening to that book, I listen to audiobooks when I'm working out. So when I was listening to that book, I just remember thinking, wow, yeah, I was always that kid who would be excited to present in front of the class. And it's funny to see how that is translating now into me wanting to pursue more speaking opportunities. So it's just, yeah, it's really fascinating.
It all connects.
It all
Yeah.
connects because, yeah.
I actually didn't even know you were in speaking until I actually saw that you did a speaking event for YJA conference in Dallas.
Yes, I did the keynote in the in Dallas for YJA in July.
Yeah,
July.
how was that experience? And the reason that was particularly interesting is because I don't know if you know, but Deepam and we're both Jain by faith, and
Oh,
so
nice.
that's how we became aware of that. I mean, I've known you for a while because I've seen your posts on social media, but I found out you were doing speaking gigs because of posts by the YJA community.
Yeah, it was amazing. That was actually my first time addressing a live audience for as long as I did. So usually in the past, the keynotes I did were like much smaller, and they were at like galas and different things like that. But this was the first time that I gave close to like or over a 30-minute talk, just speaking about my experience. It was so insightful, so amazing. First of all, I absolutely love YJA. I've asked them, I'm not Jain, I'm Hindu, but I said, can you please just invite me to your future events? Just because I love being a part of that community so much. It's so sweet, so welcoming, and just so warm. So amazing community, amazing group of people. But the process of preparing that keynote was so insightful for me as well because it involved a mix of using some of my storytelling ability from like marketing, but also understanding my audience. So all these things that I learned from marketing and a little bit of just playing around with structure and creativity. It was the best of both worlds for me. I've always loved creating. So it was that mix of storytelling plus creating art plus putting things together and creating this end product. I spent hours going through that. I made like an initial draft of what I wanted to say, realized that it didn't make any sense to me, and then I had to like rework things, and then I got confused literally like a week before I had to give this keynote. I was trying to practice. So, part of it was just putting together the PowerPoint, putting together the talk. And then obviously that's not enough. You have to practice and understand what the viewer or the audience is going to be seeing or experiencing. So once I finished that, I got in front of a camera, I taped myself giving the talk, and I was like talking over myself. I was rambling in some places, had no idea what I was saying. And I was just like, I started panicking because it was a week before I had to give this talk. I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be awful. What am I going to do? Reworked it, practiced it a few more times, reworked it again, practiced it a few more times. And then finally, like a couple of days before, I was like, okay, I think I got it. I had like a eureka moment, made the keynote, and then delivered. So it was a very rewarding process, and I feel like it's one of those things when you truly find something that, like a challenge that you're excited by, I feel like it means that you should pursue it. There's different types of challenges we have in our work, right? There are some challenges that are not fun to solve, but when you find the types of challenges that you love to solve, like I think that is definitely a good indication of like you're on the right path when it comes to pursuing this like work, this type of work.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I haven't attended those conferences in a really long time, but I remember the ones that I had attended historically, they were so much fun.
They're
They're
so
usually really
fun.
well organized, lots of
So
cultural activities. It's a blend of so many different things. So
it was amazing. Like they had like a Gerba night one night. They had a murder mystery thing going on at dinner one day. It was very, very
yeah. All right, well, I'm glad you enjoyed that. I did want to switch gears a little bit now and now talk about your acting career path.
good. Okay, sure.
So I guess I'm not sure if there's something that you may not be able to share, but whatever you're able to share, is there like what kind of genres have you been acting in? TV shows, movies, and indie films. How's that career path going?
So my acting career is probably the newest of all the different things I'm pursuing, and I really just started. I actually got into it right before COVID hit. So like that whole like
Oh, wow.
yeah, that whole 2020, I was trying to figure things out. I was going to acting classes, kind of auditioning, and then it increased a little bit more last year, increased a little bit more this year. So I'm super, super grateful for the opportunities coming my way. I would say with acting, I'm kind of right now auditioning for things like all over the board. I've auditioned for things like Gossip Girl, for Superman, for New Amsterdam, most recently for this one feature film. So that's kind of where it's going. I do feel like, with acting, it is a career that requires a lot of persistence, a lot of, again, that thick skin to deal with rejection. But fingers crossed, I am going in that direction. Fingers crossed that you guys see me in something soon.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
I'm sure if you continue the path that you're doing, you'll do great. Actually, going off that line, I saw a recent video of yours. I think you had a video with King Batch, right? How did that go? Like, how did that come to be?
Oh, it was just, I feel like online, social media, you connect with so many different people. And I'm very, very grateful that a lot of people that are in this space are so open to like collaborating, creating, making friends. So we just knew each other through social media. And then I went to LA. I was like, hey, do you want to hang out? Do you want to meet up? And then we decided to do this, like, collab videos. So I think that's just kind of how it goes. I've made so many friends through social media. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So the reason I'm laughing, and Deepam is gonna know exactly what I'm gonna say next, probably is when I spend time in the West Coast, social media is how I made a social group in the West Coast. It's
Yeah?
it's so funny. Yeah, yeah. So what I mean by that is like there's some people that I knew, but it was few and far between. I had like a couple relatives, a cousin, a second cousin, like two or three people that I knew. But a lot of other people I met exclusively through social media. So people that I saw never met before, never spoke to before, but was connected randomly on social media, and I saw they were in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I visited. So I just send them, I just send them a message, and they were like, yeah, they'd be down to hang, and then one thing led to another, and I met people through them. I met through people that they introduced me to through more people. So I created an entire social circle off of
It's
social media.
It's crazy. I was in London just back in August, and it's so funny. I That was my first time in London, and I was telling my mom, like my mom was a little worried because I went by myself. She's like, "What are you gonna do there?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have so many friends there. Like I was connected with so many people located in London for years on social that I had never met in person. But like we just became friends, and when I met them in person, it was like even better. It was like, wow." It's just the world's become so much smaller, and I think that's amazing that you can have all
Yes.
these connections all over the world just via your phone.
Yeah, especially after the pandemic, because before pandemic you had like your own close circles and just not meeting too many new people. But after pandemic, everybody's open to meeting new people and just hanging out and
It's
having
like a
fun.
social reset almost.
Exactly.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait, that's the best way I can think of describe it. A social reset. It's like before you had, like the whole thing of hashtag no new friends and all that kind of stuff going on, like very clicky types of stuff. And then as soon as the pandemic happened, it's just a social reset. Everyone's like more open to meet random people that they have never been exposed to before.
Yeah, and it's just nice, right? I think it also just makes you realize that there's so many people that could be in a different place with like a different upbringing that have the same core values as you and that you can be friends. And I really hope that's something that this next generation kind of just takes into account, that like it's possible for people to be different but also similar and come together and be friends. And that unity, that whole idea of unity, regardless of where you're from, I think is just so important.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, unless Deepam, you have any other questions, do you want to move forward to rapid fire?
Let's do that. Yeah, I wanted to do it a long time ago because I have a lot of fun questions in that round. That's
Okay,
the only
let's
reason.
go.
All right, so let me know when you're ready and we jump right into it.
Let's go.
All right, so first question, tea or coffee?
See.
All right,
You didn't even
mountains or
hesitate on
beaches?
that one. You're like straight tea.
Yeah, see.
I guess the question is, what kind of tea? Are we talking like
Yeah,
Indian chai? Okay, I was gonna say.
yeah.
Got it.
Good call there. Okay, mountains or beaches?
Mountains or beach? I like both. I prefer a beach with a mountain in the background. So I would
Okay,
go for that one.
that's interesting. That's interesting. All right, morning person or night owl?
Morning, 100%.
How early are we talking?
Like 4:45 a.m.
Well, that is early.
Wow,
So
that is
I'm gonna
early.
take a cold guess here, and I'm gonna say, are you one of the people that work out really early in the morning?
Yeah.
There we go. I figured.
Not really early. I mean, I meditate early and then I work out like around like 6 or 7.
That's still pretty early. Let's
Yeah.
Yeah,
still do
that's
that. That's
early.
still
Yeah.
pretty
I'm
early.
like a 5 a.m. early. My brother's a 5 a.m. early. I'm a 7 a.m. early.
Got it.
Sometimes 9, depending on.
Okay, we can live with that. What's your favorite comfort food?
Um, Favorite comfort food? Do I have a comfort food? I don't know. What is my favorite comfort food?
So something
Indian food?
sweet, something carb heavy. Just
Carb
throwing
heavy.
anything
Yeah.
there. Spicy,
I don't
savory.
think it's like a comfort food, but it's like a guilty pleasure. Like
Okay.
I love the sweet pakoras. You have regular savory pakoras, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
sweet pakoras, made with gur and like all those things. I would say that is like my guilty pleasure slash comfort food. It brings me comfort to eat it, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, that counts. That counts. All right. What's your favorite virtue in others?
Integrity. Like basically, this is a standard that I hold myself to, of like doing what you say you will and doing the right thing even when no one is looking. And I think it is so admirable when I see other people who embody that trait of, it's easy to do the right thing in front of other people, but are you going to do the right thing when no one is looking and kind of just like act on that goodness because you hold yourself to that standard as well?
That makes a lot of sense. So I guess the next question is, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Um, I would say like a lack of understanding or a lack of empathy. You know how like it's very easy to act on emotion, but
Mm-hmm.
you know how like if you're driving on a road and someone is being annoying, I understand like if you have like a slow driver in front of you, it's easier to be like beep beep. But it's like one thing to be like, okay, you know what? Let me just give them the benefit of the doubt. So I think I would say like a lack of empathy or intolerance, and I think we see that a lot online now. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
something that just always bothered me. Like, let's just be
Mm-hmm.
kind to one another and spread kindness as much as possible.
Makes sense. All right. So what's the weirdest compliment you've ever received?
Um,
I guess there are too many. Maybe it's hard to pick
no,
one.
there's just one that's like it's like popping up. It's like when you said it, the first thing that popped up was like you have really nice feet, which is kind of like
Wow. Okay. Wow.
that's, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that is a very strange compliment. It gets wondering, do they have a foot fetish or something? It's
I
like,
guess so, but it's I've received that many times to a point where it's kind of like, do a lot of people have this fetish or like what? That's a
Wow,
bit weird.
got it. All right, all right. What's your secret superpower?
My secret superpower, um, finding the silver lining in situations that may not seem like they have a silver lining. I feel like
Wow. Okay.
I could, I would say in almost any situation, I'm able to find the good, even if it seems sucky. But I don't want to say every, like a good majority.
so basically having a very optimistic personality.
Optimism, yeah. I
Okay,
would,
got it.
Got it. That makes sense. All
That
right.
is actually a good superpower to have, though, because I feel like, just like how we were talking about earlier, your thought patterns, they influence so much, right? So just having the positive outlook in general can help you to overcome so much adversity. So
a hundred
that's a great
percent.
superpower to have.
This was another book I had read. I forget this one though, but it was talking about how, like, suppose like a car, or like suppose a boat hit your boat. Suppose you're at sea and a boat hits your boat. If you saw there was a person in it, you'd get really mad and start yelling at the person and be like, "Wow, how could you hit my boat? Like, can't you see or whatever?" But if suppose there was no one driving the boat and it just came up to you by accident, you would be like, oh, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to be mad at? So I feel like, a lot of things, our reaction to a lot of things can be changed depending on how we interpret that. And
Hmm.
that's something we have full control over. So
Yeah.
I choose to abide by that principle of like, okay, if this situation seems really bad, if I choose to believe there's something I can learn from this and this is serving me in some way, I can make this bad situation work in my favor as opposed to feeling victimized by this thing.
That's powerful. That's really, really powerful.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. I know you referenced a lot of books, so would you like, what's one thing you would say that people don't realize about you?
I think, I don't think it's always very evident on how much of a nerd I am. I think I don't know. It's like I'm very into reading. I'm very into, those deep spiritual discussions. Um, but I don't, and I'm also like a little like, I'm like one of those extroverted introverts, but I'm definitely somewhat of an introvert because I love staying at home, even though I'm traveling so much. It's like I love traveling, but I also equally love just staying at home. So I think people don't understand how much of like a private person I am, basically, given my different.
Right.
So you're a very public, private person.
I'm a very private person. Yeah.
That makes sense. That
That's
makes
one way of
sense.
putting it, right?
Yeah. All right.
Just out of curiosity, then, right? Do you know your personality type? And the reason I ask is because, like, have you ever done like the Myers-Briggs
Yeah, yeah,
personality types?
yeah.
'Cause
I'm
the
actually,
reason, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm an ENFJ.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I am extroverted based on the personality type, but I'm also like, I was extroverted to like maybe 51%, where I was also
Oh,
introverted.
got it. Almost extroverted. So
I was,
maybe yeah, maybe ambivert is the right term that we're looking for
yeah,
here.
maybe. I think with the right company, I can be very extroverted, but overall, just generally, I also like keeping to myself as well.
That makes sense. That
Yeah, that
makes
makes
sense.
sense. And the F means very feeling oriented, which I can definitely see because you're talking a lot about empathy. You're talking about, well, you didn't use these exact words, but basically leading with love because you talk about sharing kindness and positive thoughts. So I can definitely see the F.
What
Definitely
about
see
the
the
N and the J?
Um, so N is intuition. So I guess that means you, instead of sensing things, instead of observing, you focus more on gut instinct, which I guess I don't know you well enough to know how true that is, but I guess it must be true since it's in your personality type. But, and then the last one, what is J again? I
The
don't even remember.
planning. The planning versus spontaneity.
So
So
which
I
one
think
is J?
J,
Is that planning or
J
spontaneity?
is the more like planning, having us stick to.
Okay, got
Okay.
it.
That
Not
makes sense,
Wow.
though. That makes sense. And the reason I say that, though, is you're big into reading. And the way that I always envision is if you're into reading, to a degree, you are planning for the future. Because when you're reading, and I actually shared this in a previous podcast episode, but I also view reading as a cheat code to life. And
absolutely.
the reason I say that is if you think about it, how many decades of experience did an author accumulate to write a book on a topic? They could
Yeah,
have spent 30 years of life experience to get all the thoughts and stuff consolidated and refined enough to write a book on the topic. And for you, for a couple, you hypothetically, you right, not necessarily specifically you, but if you take a couple hours to read that, you've basically capitalized on someone else's decade plus of experience. So it's a cheat code to life because if you think about it, you could read about so many different topics and become, to some degree, depending on how many times you read it, retention, and all that, an expert on the topic built off the back of the experiences of someone else. So for me, I'm a big advocate of reading for that reason, especially diverse reading, because you never know those parallels you'll make when you read about so many different topics. You may come up with a very unique thought because although the thought exists across so many spectrums, it may not be applied in a different context. And you're able to apply it to a different context because you've read bits and pieces of so many disciplines together and found the parallels where maybe someone else has overlooked them.
absolutely. I think reading is it's like there's so much knowledge, so many gems just in there, right? And what you said about the thought bubble, I think is very important because everything stems from that idea, right? It's like I love reading because you can read something and then it like sparks like an idea, and then like when you choose to act on that idea, that can just lead you to so many places that you wouldn't have even like gone to if that idea had not been sparked by that particular thing. So I'm so
Right.
with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think this is something you mentioned in the beginning as well, that everything started with an idea, right? So I think this whole conversation it feels like it's coming together in the end, almost. All
Holding
right,
true
so
to our podcast statement, right? It's connected to that.
I know, I know, yeah, yeah. So coming back to the rapid fire, a couple of more questions. So, what's a superpower you wish you had?
What's a superpower I wish I had? I would love to be able to like handshake with someone and be able to speak their language. I love learning languages. This is like a personal thing. I love learning languages. So I just am thinking like, wow, if I could just like learn languages that fast, how cool would that be?
Oh man, that's pretty interesting. Actually, we've never heard that one before.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
is a good
something.
one. I'll give you props for that one because we've not heard that one before. And we've
That
done
is
this like
absolutely brilliant.
25 times already. So
I mean, I feel like it depends, right? Because like when you said this, like it depends on the day. Sometimes if I feel more like, wow, superhero vibes, I would say something superhero related. But like today, I'm just thinking like, yeah, genuinely, if I had like a superpower, like I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo right now, or I'm refreshing my Spanish because I learned Spanish all throughout school, but I haven't practiced it, so now I have to refresh it. I was just thinking, like, yeah, if I could just like shake hands with someone who spoke Spanish and just be able to like learn it, that would be so cool.
okay. So would you say
Absolutely.
Spanish is your favorite language, or do you have a favorite language?
Oh God, I love all of them, but I love Spanish a lot just because I've been learning it since second grade, and I learned it all the way up till my second year of college. So I
Oh,
really,
okay. Wow. Wow.
yeah,
That's a long period of time there.
yeah. I should be a little embarrassed given that I have forgotten, but I have. I have to be honest, I have forgotten a little bit.
It's all good. It's all good. All right. So next question: if you were not an actor slash model slash influencer, what would you be, if anything?
What else would I be? Well, when I was younger, I wanted to be an astronaut. So I may be an astronaut. Maybe I could also see myself being like an international. Well, actually, no. Sorry. Okay, I got it. So the reason I went to school was to study marketing because I hope to be a marketing manager of a firm one day. So that was kind of my original plan before it got sidetracked. So I feel like if I wasn't pursuing this career, I would probably do marketing in some other capacity, whether it was with a business or like maybe having my own business, something like that.
Okay.
Got it.
Very
That makes
cool.
sense.
And that could still be,
I didn't decide to pursue that, and then I realized, yeah, no, I still wouldn't do that.
I was going to say that could still be manifested, right? You have plenty of time to still make that happen.
Yeah.
All this happen.
I mean, are we talking about astronaut or the marketing thing? Because the astronaut thing, I think I've like skipped.
Oh no, I was talking about.
I think we're past that.
Yeah, I was talking about astronaut. I think unfortunately that ship may have sailed, but the business one, the marketing part, that part I think is still doable.
Yeah, that could still be there. Yeah, that ship is still in the harbor.
Got it. All right. So last question in the series. I know we had a lot of tangents there, but what's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years?
In the last 1 or 2 years, my biggest.
Maybe a little bit longer. Yeah, just.
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know. It's hard to say, and it's something that I'm actually working on. I am not someone who celebrates my wins nearly as much as I should. My friend and I talk about this all the time. Sometimes what happens is when you're very like goal oriented and very like driven, you're always just looking to the future, right? It's kind of like, okay, you set a goal, you achieve it, now what? Set a goal, achieve it, now what? And this is something that I am personally working on, is to look back at the things that I have achieved to kind of see how far I've come. Because otherwise you're always in this like chasing mindset of like, okay, now what's next, now what's next, now what's next. And at times it can make you feel like you haven't done enough because you're not looking at what you've already achieved. So it's so funny that you're asking this question, because I'm just like, what did I do in the last 2 years? What was it 2 years ago? 2020? 2020, right?
Yeah.
So 2 years, I think an achievement that I am very proud of is the fact that I have been taking on more speaking related work. Truly because it's something that's very close to my heart, and I just feel so excited and so motivated, and like I just love doing it so much. So I'm very grateful that I have those opportunities to pursue that somewhere.
Okay.
Wow. Awesome. All right. So that actually brings us to the end of our rapid fire round. So before we close, I think we have just a couple of things.
One question before we ask the question that you love to ask at the end there. What's next for you, right? So you've done a lot of things so far. Tried your hand at dance, modeling, pageantry, acting, speaking. Did I miss something? Content creation, I guess.
Content creation, yeah. What's next? I don't even know what's next. I feel like each day is kind of just seeing how things are going, making an assessment of like what to do, and then going with it. I do feel like definitely more speaking related things. Health and fitness is a huge part of my day. It's something I value immensely. So perhaps something in the health and wellness field. I would say definitely those two are things I see myself pursuing much more in the future. Acting, hopefully soon you'll see me on the big screen. So lots of different things are in the works right now. It's just a matter of like time and what happens when the dots connect, what happens,
Out of curiosity, have you thought about writing by any chance? Because I know you said you're really into reading and learning, so I'm curious.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it. I could definitely see myself writing a book someday. I feel like right now is really one of the, I feel like this is the stage of my life where I'm gathering all the content, right? It's like gathering all the materials, and then eventually one day I'll publish it.
Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, back to you, Deepam. Sorry, I stole your thunder there.
No, it's all good.
But we have like a WhatsApp chat going back and forth for prompts, and he just sent me a prompt saying you stole my question.
It's all good. Don't worry about it. I mean, it happens all the time. So, I think before we close, we wanted to see if you could if you have any recommendations for our listeners. And for your reference, a recommendation could be a book or a podcast or movie, anything. I know you referenced a couple of books that you really like, maybe we can use that as a
Yeah,
recommendation.
I mean, just to recap, I would say The Almanac of Naval Ravikant is a really great book. If we're talking about just overall self development, I really like You Are a Badass. That was one of my favorite books as well. It just makes you
Is
feel very
that
empowered. You
is
Are a
that the
Badass.
one by Mark Manson?
Jen Sincero.
I'll get someone else. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's like a bright yellow cover, and it's really really nice. Like it's one of my favorite pick me up books. If I'm ever feeling like unmotivated or sad, I just read that, and I almost always feel empowered after. So those two books for sure. And then this is just like a life advice thing. I would say my recommendation is to not just to keep your light shining bright. I feel like there are a lot of forces out there that for various different reasons may try to dull your light. They may try to make you second guess yourself, as if our own self-doubts weren't enough. And I would just say that, continue to persist, continue to believe in yourself and have faith, and wherever possible, be that light for other people.
All right, beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing that. I believe that is really it for the podcast. But before we close here, I did want to give you an opportunity to share any social media handles or anything else you'd like to plug.
Oh, sure. So I am on YouTube. I am on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I am on. Well, those are my three main platforms. So that's Chhavi Verg, ChhaviVerg. You can find me on there. And yeah, I think that's it. There's so many social media platforms these days. It's like hard to think of them all, right?
All right, well, fantastic. It was such a great opportunity to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys are not already connected to Your Life Unfiltered on Instagram, please be sure to give us a follow. Thanks so much for the conversation and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.